So a few times a year, we, I don't even, I mean, there's no rhyme or reason exactly when we decide to do this, but we do not always have a Dvar Torah. Sometimes we want to ask somebody to come to the Bima and share their words of wisdom on a particular topic, particularly related to social justice, and really live out our values as a leader in social justice as well as a leader of Torah. So tonight, we're so blessed to have Jason Cianciotto come to the Bima and share his words of Torah, his words of wisdom. It's Torah, don't worry, it's Torah. It's all Torah. But we're really, really blessed and honored to have you. And Jason is the VP of Policy at GMHC. I know you've been there for longer than just 2019, but rejoined in that role in 2019, and also a co-author, right, of LGBTQ Youth in America, the book LGBTQ Youth in America, and is going to share a little bit with us about what GMHC is up to and why it's so important that still right now in New York we are fighting for AIDS research and making sure that there is awareness and action being done. And especially with the AIDS Walk coming up this weekend, we're really, really excited to have you. I just want to say one word about CBST's connection with GMHC before you come up here, which is to say that many CBST members were involved in the founding of GMHC, including Mel Rosen, former CBST president, who was the first executive director of GMHC, and we've been in close contact and community with GMHC over the years many, many, many times. So we're really, really honored and delighted to have you give us your words of wisdom this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cantor Rosen. Hi, everyone. In the spirit of the introductions that started off today, I'm Jason Cianciotto. My husband of 21 years and son and I live in a very small village in upstate New York called Morris. This is the second time that I'm here, and it's a real honor to come back. The first time that I was here had an impression on me that I wasn't expecting. Being able to sit and listen and hear you all sing, being able, and not understanding the language, though I know I could be reading in English in the book, what I chose that day and what I chose most of today is to just hear you and to experience the community and the emotion. So even though I'm not fully understanding your words, I'm feeling your intention. And that to me was an intensely spiritual experience. And so I'm very excited and grateful to be back here today. GMHC was founded in 1982 as Gay Men's Health Crisis, the world's first HIV and AIDS services organization. And it's very special to be at a place where so many have been involved for so long, including Mel Rosen, and where I know so many were lost to the pandemic. I want to thank Jay Fisher and Michael Lehrman. Without them, I wouldn't be here today. Thank you. I want to thank Rabbi Warber and Cantor Rosen and Rabbi James and Rabbi Kleinbaum from the Ether, and every one of you for joining today, because AIDS Walk is now in its 38th year. And someone sitting to my left is wearing one of our t-shirts, which says, "Stride Past Stigma." That's our theme this year. And stigma is a word that many people hear, but might not really fully know the definition. And the easiest definition that I can give is one word, which is shame. Right? Stigma is a sense of shame around who someone is, who they love, what they do. And our goal on Sunday, the 19th, starting at 9 a.m., is to continue to walk past that shame, to stand tall and stand with those who are living with and affected by, and those we've lost to HIV and AIDS. So, a discussion about HIV and AIDS policy. If there's any challenge that what I just shared with you, the experience that I've had being here with you all, hearing you all, is that a speech about policy is from my head, right? But you all encourage me, inspire me to speak from the heart. So I'm going to try to pull those things together. Michael and Jay, that means there might not be as much policy in this as you might like, but I promise I'll do the best I can. And also, might share some things with you today that might make me feel a little emotional. And I've got my water, and I've got the tissues, which leads me to believe I'm not the only one who sometimes experiences that. And I'm available and open to that with you all. In fact, Rabbi Warber, I of course didn't know that you were going to talk about being open to the second spirit coming in. And Rabbi James explained a little bit while we were talking about what that means. But it's, to me, more than just coincidental, because if I were to give a title to what I want to share to you today, it's Be Open. So everything is in alignment. But I want to start by talking about the state of HIV and AIDS in our nation, and in our city, and in our state. And I promise these are the only statistics that I'm going to read at you today, but they are very important. So as of 2021, which is the most recent data that the CDC has at the federal level, there were around 32,000 new HIV infections. Is that more or less than you thought? And that's a decrease from around 36,000 new infections in 2017. 70% of those new infections were among gay, bisexual, and men who have sex with men, or MSM as we refer to it. And the majority of those MSM came from Black and Latinx communities. And 52% of those new infections were in the South, compared to 14% here in the Northeast. Another population that is disproportionately affected by the pandemic are transgender people. The CDC says that about 1% of the US population is transgender. I think it's actually higher than that. But they represented 2% of new diagnoses, right? Which means that they were represented in new infections at twice their rate of representation in the general population. And nearly over 93% of those new infections among transgender people were among transgender women, particularly those who are Black. Now, I'm not sharing data about race and gender to in any way imply some kind of stigma around that, because it is not the state, it is not who we are as people that makes us more likely to be able to contract HIV. It's the state of the experience of living in the world and in the country that we do that places us in the context of higher risk for HIV. So moving more to the local, in New York State and New York City. In New York State, in 2017, there were about 2,800 new HIV infections, 1,700 of which were in New York City. In 2022, that dropped down to 1,700, from 2,800 to 1,700, with 1,200 in New York City. So you can see that New York City is still the epicenter of the HIV and AIDS epidemic in our state. However, it's important to note that 1,700 in 2022 is an increase from a low statewide of 1,500 infections in 2020. Now, why do you think there may have been a drop in new infections in 2020, right? Because, right, the COVID-19 pandemic, which kept everybody inside and prevented people from being able to get tested, the first and most important step of learning one's status. But is now 2024, and the most recent data from our city showed only a 2% decline in new infections. Now, the city says, well, this may still be catch up from the fact that people aren't getting tested as often. And that may be true. But one of the things that I want to share today with a heavy heart is that I think that we are in a new crisis in HIV and AIDS. And what I mean by that is that we're at a plateau. And I think that we're in danger of moving in the wrong direction. And I want to share a couple of things about why I think we're in danger. And maybe together we could also think about what we can do to try to prevent that from happening. In fact, GMHC right now is in the midst of a policy battle. In this case, it's a budget battle, because in government, budget is policy. It's an expression of values. It funds the work that policy often creates. And our city, the budget is prepared for and presented by the mayor. And in the mayor's budget, there is $1.1 million cut from GMHC, 3 programs completely cut. And since I said the mayor, I forgot to say in the very beginning that, like CVST, GMHC is a nonprofit organization. We do not promote candidates. We do not get involved in electoral politics. We do get involved in policy and in policy issues, and that's what I'll be talking about today. So the 3 programs that are cut are our Realizing Independence Through Support and Employment Workforce, or RISE, Workforce Development Program. That's a $400,000 a year program that we've had for about 15 years. And in the last decade, it's enabled us to connect 674 people living with HIV and AIDS to work, people who are ready, willing, and able to return to work. And that program will be taken away as of July 1st unless the funding is put back. The second program is what we call the Undetectables. It's a relatively new program citywide, and it's a program that is designed to help people living with HIV prioritize and stay on their medications and attend their doctor's appointments. Now, why is that important? Well, the ultimate goal for people living with HIV is to achieve and maintain what we call viral suppression. It essentially means that when their blood is tested for the virus, it's at such a low level that it is virtually undetectable, and based on the research so far, it means that it's impossible for them to transmit the virus via sexual behavior, right? And that is a pillar of ending the HIV epidemic, right? You want to stop those who are not yet HIV positive from contracting the virus, and you want to make sure that people living with HIV can't pass on the virus and also live long, healthy, wonderful, happy lives. So the third program is for our HIV and aging population, the largest growing demographic of people living with HIV in nationwide, and in our city are people aged 50 and over. And our HIV Literacy for Older Adults program serves both those living with HIV and those at higher risk for contracting the virus by providing them opportunities to learn the importance of regular doctor's appointments, regular HIV testing, and staying on their medication. But just as important, it allows us to support our annual HIV and Aging Conference, which is coming up in June, which is really a conference for practitioners working with older populations citywide, right? Anybody who interacts, including new social workers, with those older adults, comes to this conference because it is so critical for all of those spaces to be areas where people of LGBTQ identity, people who are living with HIV, to feel comfortable and feel safe, and especially if those programs are about health and sexual health. Because one of the things that stigma does, that shame does, is shut down conversation, right? Instead of being open, we're closed. And that's one of the primary contributors to the spread of HIV. So what is the reason behind a decision to cut budgets, take away programs and support services. And, well, there's a lot, but what I want to talk with you about today is the impact of trauma, and in particular, what I want to call spiritual violence or harassment, which is, it feels so fitting to be here, which is not a place of that, right? But to talk about that, because so many people grow up in a faith and a religious tradition that doesn't accept them for who they are, that rejects them. And it cleaves away 1/3 of the mind, body, spirit. It leaves people from that perspective not whole, right? And this is a place that allows for that and helps people to reconnect that, which is so wonderful and so special. But that cleaving of spirit is something that is very real and very personal to me. In 1982, when GMHC was formed, I was just across the bay, growing up in Staten Island, and being raised by a evangelical fundamentalist Christian family in the church, who first sent me to what's called conversion therapy when I was 13, and again from age 16 to 19. And one of the things that I've experienced working at GMHC for over 7 years is that experience of rejection from a community, rejection from family, the overwhelming majority of the minors in our city, people under age 18 who are homeless, are LGBTQ youth who so often have been kicked out of their families because of their particular religion. And so what does this have to do with policy? Well, policy is an important tool because it is inexorably linked to the values of the people voting for the elected officials and the elected officials who put it in place. See, unlike private corporations or individuals, nonprofits can't give money to get what we want for policy, right? So we have to rely on the goodwill of the elected officials and the goodwill of the people who put them in power to say, this is important, this is a priority, this may even be expensive, but it's something that you need to do because it's the right thing to do, or because God calls us to do it. And one of the most powerful forces right now that I think is limiting our continued growth in the fight to end the HIV epidemic are minority of voices coming from judgmental religious traditions, shutting down that conversation and making it not possible for us to continue forward. So how do we deal with this, right? How do we deal with the impacts of long-term trauma that can come from my experience of, a religious tradition that forced me to try to change who I was, and then when it didn't work, kicked me out. We have a mental health care system in our country which tries hard, but isn't able to meet the need. Now, the Affordable Care Act, or you may know it as Obamacare, did something really important, which it said to insurers, you have to put access to mental health appointments at the same level as you put other body health appointments. You can't say you can't do that, right? And that was really helpful, and that was really important. But if you live in New York City, and I lived in New York City for a very long time, you find that it might be hard to find a psychiatrist or a therapist who accepts insurance, right? So did that insurance parity really work out? And what does that mean for low-income people who might not even have insurance? Right, 70% of GMHC's new clients, and we serve about 5,500 New Yorkers a year, live well below the federal poverty line. So we connect them with insurance, but if we can't find people who can provide health care because the funding that we get for it doesn't compete with the private market, right, then we can't hire enough people to meet that need. Or if someone who from their heart chooses to earn less, to serve the communities that we serve, they might not be able to do that for very long, especially if they're leaving with a large amount of debt. And so then our clients lose connection with the people that they're working with and have to start all over again, right? Because unlike the health of other organs in our body, we know so little about the brain, right? And so the science hasn't caught up to finding ways to treat that underlying trauma that is caused, that affects our mental health, and that can lead to higher risk for HIV. All we've done is created medications, frankly, we don't really even know how they work, that can treat the symptoms, can be a Band-Aid, but don't heal what's underneath it. That's until a very recent change, and this is something that I never thought I would talk about in general, let alone in a synagogue, which is psychedelics. Right? So, psychedelics aren't new, right? They're compounds that people have been using in some ways for thousands of years. Some of the psychedelics that are now being used experimentally to treat people, especially those with trauma, came about in the 60s, and then the war on drugs started. They were criminalized, and all of the good that researchers were seeing they could possibly do when used properly under proper medical guidance went away, right? And now we're coming back. So in my personal experience, I hadn't really thought about whether even I had trauma, let alone how to treat it, because I turned to activism, right? I stopped attending ex-gay therapy when I was 19, and I came out that year officially, and then started attending a LGBT community center, started attending a youth group, and quickly found activism. But it was another strong person of faith, Reverend Bishop Yvette Flunder, who at a conference I attended when I first started working in the LGBT rights movement, when I finished graduate school in 2003, who said something that really challenged me. She was telling everybody at this conference that we've replaced God with activism. We've replaced God with activism. And that really affected me at the time. But it wasn't until I more recently became a parent of a traumatized child, that I realized that as I was parenting him, he was a mirror to me. And we adopted from the foster system when he was 11, and so that was 0 to 60 parenting in 2 seconds, right? And my husband and I focused a tremendous amount of time, and he's doing good. In fact, he's about to turn 18, and he just finished high school. Thank you. Now I have so much more time. Right? He doesn't need me like he used to. He still needs me, but he spends all his time in his room with his friends. And parenting, as many of you know, a teenager is very different than parenting a young child. And so that's left me to no longer be able to run and hide from what raising my son helped me see about myself. And so I decided that I was going to start focusing more head-on about what it would mean to heal. And so I started a psychedelic-assisted treatment program using ketamine. And it's been a revolutionary experience. And I swear this has a policy connection, because one of the things that I really hope for GMHC and our mental health program is that we could find a way to affect government policy so that our clients could benefit from something that I can afford to pay for on my own because of my privilege, right? Ketamine is what's called a dissociative. And essentially, it means that it allows one to have an experience where you're kind of an observer of yourself and your thoughts in a way that you can't be normally without the medication. And in that experience, I've learned a lot of things about myself. And that brings me to why I said that being open is such an important part of this. Because this week, I had a ketamine session. And what I'm working on right now is about healing trauma through understanding the power that I and we all have over our lives and ourselves that we think we don't have when that power is so traumatically taken away from us. And so if you're involved in or know about such a treatment program, oftentimes beforehand, you'll set an intention, right? Something to guide what you're thinking about, what you're observing in yourself. And so this intention that I set was about seeing the power I have to achieve my life's goals and my life's dreams and my life's loves. And the experience lasts about an hour, and I mean, honestly, trippy is a great way to talk about it. But in the past, when I've done these things with various intentions, I've often come up from it with some really helpful, important, meaningful things. Like, for example, one time I came out repeating over and over to myself the progression of love to hope to pleasure to joy in life. That love is all around. And that believing in and accepting love means we can have hope for ourselves. And we can take pleasure in life, in being together, pleasure in being at this service together. And being to do so brings tremendous joy. Or they've been affirmations for the love I have for my family or for myself. But this one, I came out of it with 2 words: be open. And to be honest, I wasn't really happy about that because it cost $100 to do this. And I was thinking, I spent $100 and the answer is be open? What does that mean? Right? What does that have to do with understanding the power that I have to affect the change for myself that I want and for others? But I started thinking about, okay, well, what does being open mean to me? It means being open to learning new things, being open to seeing something different, being open to truly hearing what other people feel and believe, being open to love, both giving and receiving it, being open to healing, being open to laughing, being open to forgiving, being open to making a connection, right? So what is being open for me? Well, it's about being alive. And being available to what is happening in the moment and every second of it. So tonight I've chosen to be open to all of you. And without even knowing, you started me off by talking about what it means to be open for a second spirit to come in and enrich, and to being open to what it means to caring for others. And that the act of caring for others and being concerned about our neighbors and our friends opens us up to things that we might never understand about ourselves or the world or policy unless we were willing to try it. So, what does affecting and treating and healing trauma mean for HIV and AIDS and GMHC? Well, it means a lot, and that's the subject of other discussions. But the thoughts that came to my mind before coming here were, while it's true that we're not going to end the HIV epidemic until public policy supports routine testing for everyone as part of routine care. That's one of our priority state bills that we're hoping the legislature will pass in the remaining weeks of its session, right? And what this means is that when you go to the doctor, when you go to the emergency room, an HIV test is just part of what you get. It's just there, right? There's no question that someone can feel, oh, do you need an HIV test? Oh, no, I don't want them to think I do, because what does that mean they think of me? That's the stigma, right? So we say no, when in fact we could, right? Or we're not going to end the HIV epidemic without universal access to what's called pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP. PrEP is medication that, when taken as prescribed, often a pill every day, now there's also an injectable that you can take once a month, has been shown to be about 90% effective at preventing HIV from taking hold in the body, right? So we're not going to end the epidemic until there's universal access to that without restrictions from health insurance and without restrictions caused by costs. Now, New York State has done, with support from GMHC and many other organizations, a good job of getting us there, but we're not quite there, and the laws that are there aren't being followed. For example, insurers are not supposed to charge low-income people for the cost of their regular lab work when they're on PrEP, but they do it anyway, and we hear about it after the fact, right? And so we're not going to end the HIV and AIDS epidemic until we address the underlying trauma that creates the context of risk for those who are most impacted. And one of those things that causes intergenerational trauma is this spiritual violence that I talked about, the violence that cleaves the spirit from the mind and the body. So I hope that at GMHC and more broadly, we can explore new interventions like the revisit of psychedelics as ways to heal our clients, not just treat their symptoms. And I hope that our mental health and substance use treatment program can grow, that public policy and budgets allow us to hire enough staff to do it, that allow us to pay our staff market rate so that they can stay and have long-term relationships, that allow us to provide the medications, psychedelic or otherwise, to our clients at no cost to them, so that folks who can't afford it aren't shut out. So I want to thank you for inviting me here, to being open to hearing from me and helping me to be open to you, for hearing a very weird policy discussion, and for allowing me to heal further by sharing a little bit about my history with you. I really appreciate it.